Have you ever seen a wedding go from a dream to a nightmare and then explode into a scene no one on earth could believe? Imagine standing in your dress, saying your vows, when your groom suddenly walks away. Heartbreak enough, right? But for her, that wasn't the end. Within minutes, the ground began to shake, engines roared, and the church doors burst open. 1,000 Navy SEALs and a convoy of 100 black SUVs stormed the ceremony. Why? That's the story I'm about to tell you. And trust me, you won't want to miss a second. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit subscribe because the stories we bring will keep you locked in till the very end. The church was full, family, friends, flowers, and cameras ready to capture what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Isabella stood at the altar in a gown that shimmered like moonlight, her heart pounding with love and nerves. Her groom, Daniel, stood opposite, looking sharp in his tailored suit. The priest's voice echoed through the grand hall. "Do you, Daniel, take Isabella?" But instead of answering, Daniel hesitated. His lips parted, but no words came. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Isabella's smile faltered. Then, like a scene from a nightmare, Daniel stepped back, shook his head, and walked away. Gasps filled the church. Her mother nearly fainted. Her bridesmaids froze in shock. Isabella's bouquet slipped from her trembling hands. She stood there, abandoned mid-vows, her life crumbling in front of everyone she loved. But what no one realized was that Daniel's sudden exit wasn't betrayal. It was warning. Moments after Daniel left through the side door, the faint rumble of engines grew louder. Guests turned their heads as the stained glass windows shook from vibrations. Outside, black SUVs appeared. Dozens, then hundreds, in tight formation, tires screeching as they surrounded the church. Within seconds, the rumble became a roar, and armed men in tactical gear poured out, forming a perimeter. Then came the helicopters, shadows sweeping across the churchyard. And finally, the SEALs. 1,000 of them, storming in, boots pounding like thunder. The wedding turned into a battlefield. Guests screamed, some ducking under pews, others rushing to shield children. But Isabella didn't move. She stood frozen, not from fear, but from recognition. What no one at the wedding knew, not her family, not even her bridesmaids, was that Isabella wasn't just any bride. Before she ever put on a white dress, she had worn a uniform. Years earlier, she had been part of a covert program, working alongside Navy SEALs in missions so classified her name was erased from every record. Her call sign, White Dove. She was a legend among them, a strategist whose quick thinking had saved hundreds of soldiers in missions that never made headlines. Daniel knew. He had discovered her secret weeks earlier. And he had also discovered something else, that enemies from her past had tracked her down, planning to strike at her most vulnerable moment. That's why he walked away mid-vows, not to abandon her, but to draw their attention away from her, to trigger the protection detail waiting outside. The church doors slammed open, and the lead SEAL commander stepped inside. "White Dove," he barked, his voice echoing. "We've got you covered." Isabella's breath caught. She hadn't heard that name in years. Chaos erupted. Armed men in black tactical suits swarmed every aisle, securing exits, checking every guest. Outside, the SUVs created a wall of steel, their engines still humming, ready for pursuit. Guests pulled out phones, some crying, others stunned into silence. The wedding was no longer a wedding. It was an extraction mission. Isabella locked eyes with the commander. "Why now?" she whispered. He handed her a tablet showing intercepted communications. Her enemies weren't just watching. They were minutes away from striking the church. The wedding had been a trap. Suddenly, the sound of gunfire cracked outside. Enemy vehicles stormed the perimeter, and the SEALs responded instantly, their formation tightening. Black SUVs repositioned, blocking the gates. Helicopters dipped lower, floodlights blazing across the battlefield. Guests huddled together, terrified, as Isabella made the hardest choice of her life. She couldn't be the bride anymore. She had to be White Dove again. Kicking off her heels, she lifted her gown, revealing a dagger strapped to her thigh, a relic of her past life she had never let go. Gasps echoed from her bridesmaids. But Isabella didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, joining the SEALs at the front line. The commander nodded with respect. Once a dove, always a dove. What followed was chaos, bullets, smoke, shouts, and Isabella moving with the precision of someone who had never lost her training. Guests watched in stunned disbelief as the bride, who had just been abandoned at the altar, now fought like a warrior at the church doors. When the dust settled, dozens of enemy vehicles were destroyed, and those who had come for her were in custody. The SEALs had secured the area, but the church was ruined. Flowers trampled, pews shattered, glass shattered across the floor. Guests emerged slowly, shaken but unharmed. Isabella stood in the center, blood on her gown, veil torn, chest heaving. And then, from the chaos, Daniel reappeared. He walked back into the church, escorted by 2 SEALs. Isabella's eyes widened. He wasn't just her groom. He had been her handler all along, assigned to watch her in civilian life, disguised as a lover. The wedding was never meant to happen. It was always meant to be bait. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice breaking. Daniel lowered his eyes. "Because you were supposed to have a normal life. But they never stopped hunting you." The guests would never forget what they saw that day. 1,000 SEALs storming a wedding. A bride fighting like a soldier. A groom walking away only to return as an undercover protector. Isabella's life would never be normal again. She couldn't just be a wife. She couldn't just be a nurse, a daughter, a neighbor. She was White Dove, and her world would always demand her courage. As the convoy of SUVs escorted her away from the ruined church, she looked back at what could have been and forward at what she had to become again. The wedding wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of her return. And that, my friends, is the story of how one woman's wedding turned into one of the most unforgettable moments of her life. Betrayal, revelation, and an army storming the ceremony. It sounds impossible, but sometimes truth and destiny are stranger than fiction. If this story hooked you, if it made you imagine the impossible, then don't forget to subscribe, because we've got more stories like this, stories of love, loss, courage, and secrets too big to stay hidden.